As we have been reporting, the Supreme Court could be on the verge of overturning Roe versus Wade, but a recent Puck News article suggests it will take a lot more for Democrats to fight what it calls a, quote, ruthless 50-year political campaign, unquote, by conservatives to overturn Roe. Founding partner at Puck News, Peter Hamby, is the author of that article, and he joins me now. Peter, first and foremost, quick commercial. Tell our audience what Puck News is.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, Puck, we need some name ID. Puck is a group of journalists who cover Wall Street, Washington, Silicon Valley, Hollywood. The goal is to sort of peel back the curtain, tell folks what's really going on, what gets said in the green room, not necessarily on television, even though I promise to tell you everything here, Major. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun starting this up. I hope everyone can read and subscribe.
Yes, it's a subscriber thing, and I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, good journalists cost money. Pay for it.
Thank you.
Peter, you write something that many in this audience may not know, but it's important. You write that in the immediate aftermath of Roe versus Wade decision, there was not a concerted effort to reverse it or a necessarily coherent, organized political movement to achieve that. Explain that to the audience.
Exactly, Major. Out here in California, where I am, Gavin Newsom, the governor, he raged at a press conference right after this happened saying, where's the pushback? Republicans have been winning. And he's exactly right. You and I have spent a lot of time at faith and freedom conferences and any number of conservative/evangelical events that have been designed for over 40 years now to get grassroots Republicans, evangelicals, Baptists, conservative Catholics involved in politics at every level, from the state house to the governor's mansion, to the Congress, to the Senate, and to the presidency. There's a reason presidential candidates go to Iowa and South Carolina every 4 years and seek endorsements from local evangelical leaders. They have a direct tie to grassroots, regular conservative voters who vote in every single election. And abortion has always been the number one thing. Obviously, there's been gay marriage and family values, but going back to the Carter years, abortion became a way to rally conservatives, peel off maybe conservative Democrats and swing voters. And this has just been going on for such a long time. Roe has been enshrined in law since 1973. And so a lot of Democrats, while they give money every few years to Planned Parenthood, et cetera, they vote. It's an issue among many that they care about. It's never been an existential threat in a way that it has for conservatives. And so Democrats suddenly are kind of left in the wilderness here. There's nothing to do at the federal level. We saw just today the Senate voted 51-49 against codifying Roe in federal law. Joe Manchin sided with Republicans there. There's not a lot can be done at the federal level. And to appoint judges at the way Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump have, and Republicans for years before them, this is going to take decades. And Democrats just don't have the muscle at the local state house level that Republicans do, who control more than half of U.S. state houses. More than a third of federal judges right now are Donald Trump appointees. Sorry, a quarter of judges right now are Trump appointees, which is a huge amount. But that was decades in the making. And Democrats, I don't know if they're ready, Major, to even grapple with how long it's going to take to reclaim at the federal level the protections that Roe enshrine.
You know, in our experience, Peter, the question of abortion used to come up with some regularity in presidential campaigns, not at the primary level, but at the general election campaign and in party platform debates, suggesting there was a time not too long ago when both parties, at least at some level, wrestled with the underlying politics of abortion. Now it appears each party is essentially monolithic, has one idea and one approach to this issue. Can you describe that hardening and the process behind it?
I'm really glad you mentioned that. I feel like that's been lost in the conversation. You know, part of this is symmetrical to the way politics has unfolded in the Trump era, where, you know, one team believes one side of the issue and the other team believes the other side, and there's not much of a middle ground. Bill Clinton, even Hillary Clinton, in the Clinton years, favored abortion, but wanted it to be, remember, safe, legal, but rare. Most Americans oppose repealing Roe, but also most Americans support some kind of middle ground where they're a little maybe queasy about third trimester abortions, for example. And so, again, this goes back to what Republicans realized a long time ago, which is that, you know, it's not as cut and dry of a political issue. And there are lots of swing voters out there who might be pro-life. I mean, there used to be pro-life Democrats in Congress,
Yep.
and there used to be pro-choice Republicans. For example, Arlen Specter, who ran the Judiciary Committee when Samuel Alito was being confirmed back in 2006. Those sort of, ambiguous political beliefs are very real out there, even if they don't surface at the federal level.
So you write in your piece, which I really recommend people take a look at, that those on the left seeking to preserve abortion rights have been somewhat casual, or more precisely, less mobilized in protection as to those mobilized to restrict access. How do you think the advent of Plan B pills or morning after pills influenced those on the side of preserving abortion rights? Meaning, maybe they assumed because those approaches existed, Roe was not directly implicated or in jeopardy, and larger, broader abortion rights were not in jeopardy, something they're in full public view now, openly reevaluating.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Rebecca Traister wrote a piece in New York Magazine, and she is a longtime supporter of abortion rights and rages frequently against the Republican right on this matter. And she pointed out that, for example, Congresswoman Gwen Moore, before 1973, I think in 1970, wanted to get an abortion when she was in college, but couldn't. And so, that at a young age for her really defined her politics growing up in her life. And a lot of younger Democrats today, women, take for granted, I think, the free access of birth control and reproductive care at all levels. And so I think, I don't want to say it's demobilized their interest in the idea of abortion and their passion for protecting abortion rights. But even after this happened, I saw a journalist in Texas, for example, who was tweeting out, how to access abortion pills and the safety behind those things, and also in Texas, the legal risk behind accessing that kind of care. And she was sort of insinuating that while, yes, the end of Roe is very bad, it doesn't necessarily mean the end of abortion access in this country. So it's become a much more complicated matter over the years, but it's just going to be interesting to see how this plays out at the state level, not just in terms of full-blown abortion bans, but what you're talking about. Will Republican politicians, governors, and legislators try to restrict other kinds of reproductive health? Plan B, we don't know, but given what's happened over the last not just week, but year, it's not implausible to think that those sort of things might try to get passed in Republican states. And
real quick, Peter, based on what you were reporting, it's not a huge leap to see Republicans saying, having achieved, quote unquote, this victory, they would go the next step further, which is toward contraception. Yeah, it's not implausible. I mean, 26 states, I believe, are contemplating banning abortion completely. It's just, we don't know. It's just that I think as much as this is the culmination of a 40, 50-year campaign by the right, I think that because they could currently control all levers of government in a lot of places in this country, nothing's off the table. I mean, they are really running government at all levers, especially in certain states. And, this is a Republican Party where if you don't say or believe in the most flagrantly conservative thing, someone's always to your right coming around the corner to primary you. And so that's why I think things could move very quickly in a direction on a lot of these social issues that, while we might not be prepared for them, we should no longer think that they can never happen. And what happened this week, at least with the Politico news, is a reminder of that. Peter Hamby, thanks for the news, the conversation, and the information. Appreciate it. Thanks, Major.